Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another exciting webinar for a series of webinars that present the results of the Living Co-Creation workshops. So, for the new listeners especially, I would first like to introduce you to our project, Living Innovation, to give some context to this webinar. Living is an initiative that was started by 14 European partners, and that includes big industry leaders, civil society, and research organizations. So together, we're collaborating to co-create more responsible approaches to innovations in the fields of smart homes and smart health. Within the Living project, 20 co-creation workshops are taking place in 5 European countries throughout 2019 and 2020. And those workshops started in June 2019 with the aim of engaging industry representatives, lead users, and citizens in a co-creation process. Their goal is to develop new solutions or, of course, to improve existing solutions that would at the same time satisfy user needs, tackle societal challenges, and create new business opportunities. If you're interested in the Living Innovation project and you would like to know more about it, you can find a lot of information on our website on www.living-innovation.net. The webinar today presents the results of one of the co-creation workshops that was led by SmartHomes about a month ago in September 2019. SmartHomes is the Dutch National Expert Center for Smart Houses and Smart Living, and it is based in Eindhoven. The workshop explored with participants the future demands of energy-neutral houses, how noise and polluted air affect us at home, and what is needed for an acceptable quality of life for us in our houses. So this webinar, Indoor Climate Change, presents the results of that workshop. Before we start, I would like to present the presenters of today's webinar, Ad van Berlo and Marjolein Winters. Ad van Berlo is both mechanical engineer and psychogerontologist, and he has a PhD in biomedical technology. In 1998, he founded SmartHomes, where he is currently research and development manager. Ad has 20 years of experience in smart homes technology, smart living, care technology, e-health, and telemedicine. He was also chair of the Forum Program Committee of the Active Assisted Living Forum 2012 in Eindhoven. Marjolein Winters has a background in health sciences and has specialized in the field of healthcare policy, innovation, and management. She studied at Maastricht University and at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Marjolein is now project manager at SmartHomes after working as a policy manager in a hospital. So before we start with the webinar, I would like to let you know that the webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you in the next couple of weeks. If you have any problem with audio or video during the webinar, please make sure to let us know using the chat box, and a team member will try to come back to you as soon as possible. At the end of the webinar, as always, we will have some time for Q&As for attendees. So please ask any question you might have or any comment using that chat box, or you can send us your questions to info@living-innovation.net. So with that, I will pass on to Ad and Marjolein for their presentation. Welcome to you both, and we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you, Teresa, and good afternoon, everybody. We start, 1 second. Yeah, now you see the full screen. So, yeah, we started this workshop with, well, first questions and a sort of quiz where we try to find out how the participants were knowledgeable about indoor climate, what they were thinking, and so on. And then we did this introduction that I summarize in a few minutes. Then, yeah, we had group discussions, and we talked about responsible research, and again a group discussion and talking about the important aspects of responsible research and innovation. So yeah, so the 5 questions and statements, I'm not going to talk about that for time reasons, but we will continue with the introduction on indoor climate. And 1 second, screen is a little bit too, yeah, now it's better. So The indoor climate, what is it actually? And we refer here to two types of definitions. One is more general from a company called Velux. They are particularly strong in well, mechanical ways of particularly um, indoor well, air and how to improve that. But they say indoor climate is a collective designation of the environmental factors that affect us when we are indoors, and it includes all air, humidity, heat, light, noise, smoke, and particles, as well as chemicals. The more generic definition of the World Health Organization is including the same, more or less, as you can see, but they also include here the so-called actinic environment, so lighting and radiation, electrical and magnetic fields. We don't know too much about that yet, but more people are aware that radiation, or let's say Wi-Fi or whatever wireless signals within the house, are also a cause of well, maybe even disease. So this is not talked about today, but more and more people, more companies, more research organizations are talking about the influence of that. And we do not talk about mechanical environments either. But yeah, and let's say the indoor climate you could see also in a broad sense as you should not fall or break things or whatever. Yeah, we talk about indoor climate a little bit more now from the Dutch perspective. And that means that we have in our country, in the Netherlands, 7 million houses, more or less. And we all know that a lot of renovation is required when we want to go to the energy transition, as all countries have to do. It's of course very expensive when you do that. Well, not of course, but if you and I come back in a minute, what you all need to do. There's a lot of money involved. In the new build houses, you can do it from scratch on, and you can make them energy neutral and also without gas. Why without gas? I come back in that also in a minute. This is particularly the case for the Netherlands. But inside the home, we should also realize that energy is used for all kinds of things, as you see here: heating, personal hygiene, cooking, relaxation, and of course more also cooling these days, particularly in hot summers, as we experience also here. So when you talk about energy saving, which is a very important task for all of us, you start with saving energy in the so-called trias ecologica. So here I see that the C is forgotten. It should be ecologica, trias ecologica in right Latin. We start with saving energy. So insulation of a house is really the most important thing to save energy. And of course, we should try to reduce gradually the use of fossil energy sources and increase the renewable ones. We also have still the Paris Climate Agreement, where most countries have an attribution, have underlined that, and that's reducing the CO2 emissions. And then on top of that, and that's particularly true in our country, which is very interesting because our neighbor country, Germany, is more or less promoting gas and get rid of the coal heating, which in some cases is still going on. And we try to get rid of gas, and the reason for that is that the sources that where we get the gas from in the northern part of the Netherlands has really suffering from earthquakes. So our government has put in place that in 2050 no gas should be used anymore in the Netherlands. So we are in a sort of transition to a gasless period. Well, another thing which has big influence on the indoor climate is, of course, the outdoor climate. And here we have also a very unfortunate thing. If you maybe recognize in the Netherlands in the top of that, so you can probably discover that with the small lines. You see the Netherlands is in the top there with a deep purple and red part. That means that more than half of the Netherlands has really a bad air continuously. We knew that, but the bad air is caused by heavy industries, by surrounding industry areas from other countries like the Ruhrgebiet and Antwerp. But it's not good, and that causes approximately 11,000 deaths due to bad air per year. That is something that we realize, but we can't do too much about it. But the thing is, of course, that we get that air also in the house. Also related to that is that 1.2 million of the 17 million Dutch people have lung diseases. And even a bigger amount, something like a quarter of all children at school have some asthmatic problems. So this is even worse. I didn't mention this figure here because it came only last week or 2 weeks ago in the news that 1 in 4 children has that problem. So we really have some problems. Now, when we think about healthy living, you should also realize that we spend 2/3 of our time more or less in our own houses, and the rest is, of course, we are outside going to work and so on. But we must realize another thing, and that is that the indoor air can be even more polluted than outside, and that is already bad, as I talked about a few minutes ago. And that is that substances, microparticles, can be released from new furniture, from wall painting, from cleaning, from house mites in the bed, etc., from cooking. So, we are also creating our own bad and indoor environment all the time during the day when we're in the house. And also on top of that, the temperature and air humidity are often not in balance. That's quite difficult, particularly if you don't have mechanical means, or if you don't have, if you have old houses which are not very well, let's say, ventilated, natural or mechanically. So that you can imagine that many innovations in materials, in floor coverings, in paints and so on, in climate control are coming up. Which is necessary and for the obvious reasons that I mentioned. So yeah, we have not, I will not go now in detail with all the technical solutions because it's quite technical, but you know that we are now using more and more sensors that measure the CO2, the carbon dioxide, of course also the nitrogen oxide, which is very topical at this moment, but also the fine dust particles. We also measure that also indoor, particularly also outdoor because of traffic problems and so on, but also indoor, and that we can then ventilate with forced ventilation the houses. This can be demand driven to improve the quality of the air inside. That's not done on a regular basis. It's very expensive, or quite expensive, I should say, not very, but quite expensive. And most houses have not all these kind of filters and sensors that I mentioned. But you see more and more attention for industry working on that. What I refer here in this slide to is more to why, and you see that coming up now also very strongly, why should we not use more natural products and also ask for help from nature? Just also yesterday I saw a big documentary on TV where the construction of wooden houses is promoted much more than it should be, than it is done right now, and it's much more healthy. That's one thing. Back to nature. It has also to do with the CO2 production that we have in our society. But also what you see more and more is the use of natural plants, particular plants. This is in Dutch, unfortunately, but plants can also capture, of course, CO2 and release oxygen, but also they can create they can even capture fine dust particles within the house. So it's very interesting also to look at plants. And what you see in some new designs for over, let's say, in the next decades, in 20, 30 years, you see these type of skyscrapers where the natural environments are coming back. And a little bit more far in the future, but also being studied right now is the incorporation of living walls, living plants, living furniture, where living cells are part of the construction. So this is more far away, but you see that we are definitely in general in society, I would say, looking at solutions that try to come back to nature, try to prevent how to say that the fact that we are living between not very good air and climate and so on. So we definitely are looking for better solutions. And when looking at the future, there are of course things that also should be in our thinking. Is it all good? Is it all wanted? And that's the second part, I think, of this presentation.
Yes, thank you, Odd. Thank you, Teresa. So I'll talk a bit more about the workshop and especially our results. During the beginning of the workshop, we provided all the participants with a round sign colored green for fact and red for false. Then we gave them 5 different statements about indoor climate, and the participant could answer them by putting up the sign, the color corresponding to the answer, without knowing the answer of the other participants. And the first statement we gave them was, every day, every single person breathes about 5,000 liters of air in and out. Only one participant estimated this correctly, and that this amount should be more, as the correct answer would be 11,000 liters. The second statement was, 85% of our time we spend inside. This is true, as most of our time we spend in our own home or at work, as Ad just mentioned in his presentation. Only one participant didn't give the right answer. The first statement was, a common household produces around 10 liters of moisture by breathing in and out, transpiration, etc. As we also thought beforehand, this question would be a bit more difficult, although some participants still guessed it correctly. The ones that didn't know the answer thought the number should be less than 10 liters. The next statement was, the perfect temperature to sleep is 20 to 24 degrees, which was again estimated well by all the participants, except for one. Most realized that the perfect temperature should be a bit lower. The final statement was, an air conditioning could give you a cold in Dutch summer. As this is considered to be the truth by many people, this is not the case. If the difference is more than 4 degrees, then you could get a cold because of the big temperature switch, but the air conditioning itself shouldn't give you a cold. The second round of statements were statements to trigger some thoughts about indoor climate. And you can see on this slide that statements we asked our participants. The most striking results were that we should consider that the air is not always better outside. Hence, it is not always healthier to open your window if you live in a polluted area, as Odd just told you. Also, the participants considered being able to open your window in the bedroom and the kitchen were the most important ones. Another important discussion was about statement 9. We will all have to get used to the fact that the heating cannot exceed 18 degrees in the winter and that we do not fall below 25 degrees on a hot summer day. This statement is related to unnecessary energy use and bearing in mind that we have to be careful with our resources, of course. Some participants were okay with putting on an extra sweater in the winter, for example, but most didn't think this was acceptable, as the climate in their own homes would be very uncomfortable. The discussion about statement 10 was also quite interesting for. Fill every home with as many plants as possible. They regulate humidity, capture dust, give off oxygen, and provide a friendly environment. Then we don't need to use all that new technology. All participants really like plants, and especially to young people, it's kind of cool to have a lot of plants in your own home. However, most young people live in smaller homes, and plants also require a lot of space. So perhaps a combination of both technology and plants would be most desirable. And then we went on with the first group round, and we divided the participants in 3 groups of 4 people and asked them to answer the following question in those small groups. Concerning indoor climate, what is important in your own home? After discussing this within 15 minutes, the groups gathered back together again and discussed their results together. We also used the methodology of the 5 whys, meaning by repeating why 5 times in a row, the nature of the problem as well as the solution becomes clearer. So, we've asked the participants what they consider to be important related to indoor climate in their own homes, and they mentioned the following. First, good isolation, clean air, balanced humidity, automatically colder temperature at night and warmer temperature during the day, a system that can regulate everything according to your own preferences, a generally healthy climate, a self-cleaning air filter, meaning that you don't have to think about cleaning your filters yourself, a smart flower pot, which can tell you when your plants need, for example, water, more sunlight, or even plant food, an allergy-proof air, especially for those who have, for example, hay fever, no weird or nasty smells, and a comfortable and safe climate in general. Then we discussed some of these innovations further, but although most were cool, the question remained whether we really need so many innovations in our home. It should be personally decided according to one's own needs. After the first group round, we explained the basics of responsible research and innovation. On this slide, we put the definition given by Horizon 2020, and we'll just shortly discuss it, which is the following. Responsible research and innovation, short RRI, implies that societal actors work together during the whole research and innovation process in order to better align both the process and its outcomes with the values, needs, and expectations of society. After discussing RRI, we went on the second and last group round. Participants could pick a color, blue, green, or orange. Based on that card, the groups were mixed and made. In these groups of 4 participants, they could write down on different cards of their color characteristic, technologies, or other important aspects of indoor climate. After they had written down these, they were asked to try to organize this in a way that would make sense to them. Then the groups gathered back again and we discussed the main findings and wrote those down on large papers. The methodology used is called card sort. The goal of card sort is to develop a deep understanding of the participants' desired innovation/aspects in 2030. It also helps to elucidate the attitudes, values, desires, and/or behaviors of the participants. You can also see a few examples of card sort on our slides. So the themes that were mentioned to be the most important were healthcare, comfort, and privacy. An indoor climate needs to have a healthy environment. The temperature needs to be comfortable, just as having a nice smell, and you need to have privacy and not having the feeling that people are listening to you. Desired technologies that were mentioned by our participants were, for example, a smart flower pot, being able to indicate its needs, an automatic temperature controller, especially for the difference between day and night and when you're not at home, and a clean air filter that is able to rinse itself. We also found it quite striking that the participants didn't mention the importance of a good indoor climate for the environment, especially because this subject is now many times discussed in the Dutch news channels. Only one participant mentioned that it was just as important to her as, for example, a comfortable home. We also had a discussion about the use of data. So, for example, is a company allowed to know your personal preferences, such as your perfect temperature? Those opinions differed widely for the participants, as some were okay with the companies using all the data, as long as they didn't stock them commercially. Others only wanted it for their own personal gain, such as getting a more comfortable and healthier indoor climate. And others didn't want the data to be used for anything at all. Finally, we will wrap up our main conclusions from the indoor climate workshop, which are lined up in the following 2 slides. The first one is the young participants were interested in the subject of indoor climate, but not aware of the importance of this subject. The knowledge about influence of indoor climate on personal health was quite limited, but when known, considered to be very important. Participants were very interested in using plants instead of technology. Although indoor climate technology was considered as important, we should only use what we only need. Participants considered their own comfort as very desirable. Most participants were less interested in the influence of indoor climate on our general environment. And finally, participants were aware of what can happen to your data, but the opinions about how companies should deal or handle with our data were quite different. Well, this is the end. We would be happy to answer some of your questions. So, Teresa, let me know if there were any questions.
All right, thank you very much to you both, Ad and Marjolein, for your presentation. So as Marjolein said, please keep sending your questions through the chat or using our email address info@living-innovation.net. So let's start with a first question. What were the most surprising results of the workshop? I know you mentioned some, but what were something that you didn't expect?
Well, personally, I was a bit shocked that the influence of, for example, having a high temperature in your own home didn't really matter to the participants, that it's not really good for the climate itself. So like the environment also in the European Union is now a very important subject to regulate this better. And we thought that the participants didn't really care about it. Their own comfort and their own health was considered to be more important. And that was something we didn't really expect from the beginning.
Okay. What were the main needs then that the participants, I know you already also mentioned some, but the main needs that the participant expressed regarding indoor climate?
Well, one thing, it also, of course, depends on the participants, but we had one participant, we had a lot of allergies. And then quite logically, for her, it was very important to have a clean air. So she also suffered from hay fever, and if she would have an indoor climate that would tackle a hay fever, that would be really, really important to her. And we also had a participant, for example, he couldn't really handle a lot of prickles. So for example, that your indoor climate reacts on your stress level. And this sounds a bit weird, but to explain it a bit, for example, if you are stressed, then you'll get a blue light, and that blue light will comfort you. So we had really, really different kind of people, and everyone said something different that was the best for them personally. So some people said health, because they suffered from health issues. Some people were totally healthy. They would more consider comfort to be the most important one. And everyone had their different opinions about that.
Thank you. Ad, you mentioned wood in your presentation. So how does using wood, so in combination with new technologies, affect the indoor climate? So do you think wood would be the material of future smart homes?
Well, it's difficult to say, but and I have no evidence myself, but it seems that the breathing of wood, so to say, breathing of walls that are of wood and also ceiling floors in the house have indeed an influence on health. That is something that we know more or less for ages, because there are, particularly the Finns and the Swedes have more wooden houses than let's say the countries more in the rest of Europe, and it seems to have a beneficial effect. Now, in the Netherlands, for instance, but also in other countries, bricks and stone is the traditional way of building, and it's not easy to change that. But yeah, the effects, the long-term effects of a wooden environment are apparently bigger than we think. I don't have it myself. I don't have a biological explanation right now.
Okay, thank you. How are you going to feedback the results of the workshop now? So what are the next steps now that this workshop is over?
Well, we continue collecting more information because it's quite yeah, it's a lot in the news these days. Not only the CO2 collection as we all have in Europe, but particularly in our country where we had the issue of the gasless transition, the transition without gas, but also we have a high discussion on reduction of nitrogen oxides, and that means that we must change the way we build houses, the material of the houses, but also how we treat the indoor quality, treat the indoor air, and so on. Yeah, so we will continue investigating that, talk to different experts, also to find out indeed, as we mentioned a minute ago, about the importance of wood. Yeah, and then we continue also to try to develop a sort of moderate, cheap way of building a smart house, which takes care of all these things that we learned. So the big challenge we have also in this Live-In project, and it's also a joint action where we work on affordable smart homes. So how can we build houses that are affordable and smart enough to tackle all these kind of problems?
Thank you. Another question about one of the pictures you showed in your presentation with the plants and the living walls in the house. So how long until this slide, so with the living room, could become a reality? Do you think? Yeah.
No,
How
it
far
will,
is the
there are already some experiments, but before it will really come into reality, I guess at least 10 years, maybe 20 years, 10 to 20 years. It's something that we have to master. We must also study the long-term influence. I mean, well, you could even introduce new viruses and bacteria. If I look at from the bad side, the negative side, if you have not sufficient treatment of indoor climate, you could introduce new other mechanisms. So you should not totally rely, I think, personally on biological materials. So that we need a lot of investigation, long-term investigations, I think.
All right, and I have another question more about generally about all the workshops that you did so far. So because now I have more experience about it and so on. So in your opinion, what are the advantages of using co-creation for an organization like yours?
Yeah, like Marjolein also already said, sometimes there are unexpected views of people that we are not thinking about. So that it's not, of course, representative for whole society, because it's the opinion of one or two of the participants. But it gives us thinking of that. Yeah, hey, that's an interesting angle or point of view. So yeah, that's at least the relevance of having these co-creation workshops. We also have done these workshops with different groups. We did, for instance, the robotics one with nurses, with people who take care for demented persons. Yeah, we had a group of people with augmented reality, who are interested in that particular topic, but didn't know too much about it, but more engineers. So yeah, it's also interesting to have different groups for co-creation and not only, let's say, the general citizen.
All right, thank you so much. So does anyone has any other question? I think otherwise we've gone through all the questions right now. If you are interested in the Living Innovation Project, please make sure to visit us on our website on www.living-innovation.net. Also, the joint action that Anne mentioned on affordable smart homes, you can also have a look at it on our website if you want to have more information about it. So thank you very much to the participants, and of course to you, Ad and Marjolein, for your presentations. And for sharing, for being with us today. So our team will be reaching out in the next couple of weeks with the recording of this webinar and the recordings of our other webinars actually. And as said, you can always visit us on our website. So thank you everyone for joining us today and have a great afternoon.